Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Scale degree chords versus modal chords, focusing in on those built from the Ionian mode, otherwise known as the major scale part number 2. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', for which you need Microsoft Excel. A lot of people out there will tell you otherwise. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know. Here we are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there, or just build the part of the worksheet we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab we'll take a look at shortly, the example tab, in essence the answer key, the practice tab having pre-formatted cells, so you could practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay, because we'll be working in the blank tab, where we started with a blank worksheet, and we'll be continuing in essence with the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only our music skills but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. Let's go back to the fretboard tab to get an overview of our objective. Our fretboard all of a sudden has gotten way more colorful, but don't worry, it's not political. In a future course or section, we're going to come up with an absolute color system that we can apply to the points, that being the note points and the modal or nodal points, and another color system to apply to distance, that being intervals or modal distance. For right now, as we consider chords, we want to break out each of the frets into 2 halves. That first half, once again, being the point, which we can name as a note point or a relative position point within the 7-note collection that we're working in. In this case, we have the fretboard with the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling on top, working in the 7-note collection around the C major, which means the C is the Ionian node or Nashville number system number 1. The second half of the fret is going to give us the distance, which is going to be interval distance or modal distance. To do that, however, we have to look at it from the perspective of one of the 7 nodes in the 7-note collection. In this case, from the C, which is the Ionian node. That, in essence, is how you build chords, right? When we think about the chords, we can name the chords by each of the points that are in the chords, by the note points, or the relative position points, or we can name the chord by the distance. We're going to pick the root of the chord and then measure out the distances, naming the chord in essence by the distances from that point that we are on. So for example, here we've got the C. The distance from itself is just going to be a perfect verse, or 0 notes away. If I move 2 frets up, for example, I'm going from the C to the D, or from the Ionian node to the Dorian node, or the 1 Nashville number system to the 2 Nashville number system, and that would be a major second, or a 2-note away major second. Or from a modal distance, it's 2 notes from the Ionian node, first modal half step, meaning this is the first in the series of 7 notes, because this note is not in the 7-note collection, it's in the ocean. If we went 2 up here, from the C, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 notes up. We're going from the C or Ionian to the E note, which is going to be the Phrygian note from a Nashville number system. It's 1, 2, 3. And the distance would be a 4-note away, which you can call a major third, or a 4-note away from the Ionian node, second modal half step. Why? Because this is in the series of 7 notes, 1, 2, 2 modal half steps up. So that's how we can basically name our chords. Now, as we go through this, remember the problem with our current naming convention is that if I say something is a major chord, I can't really tell if I'm building the chord from a functional standpoint off of the Ionian node, the Mixolydian node, or the Lydian node, because they all have a major third. From a functional standpoint, that's not ideal. I want to be able to say, no, look, this is an Ionian chord, so that I can not only know what the major third is, I know where I am in the 7-note collection. I'm on the Ionian node, not the Mixolydian or Lydian node. And if I want to add something other than the third, then I know what the intervals are if I know the intervals of the major scale. If I'm on the Mixolydian, which is kind of the bluesy node, if I say it's a G major, then I don't really know where I'm at within the collection of notes, right? But if I say it's the Mixolydian chord that I'm building, then I know, oh, that's the one that has the minor 7 in it because it's the bluesy one. And so now I can not only build the triad from it from a functional standpoint, I can add the proper 7 to it from a functional standpoint. So from a functional standpoint, it would be way better to build the chords by relative position, and it would be better to actually write your music by the relative position by saying I'm playing in the key of C or the collection of notes of the key of C, like the Nashville number system, even if I'm playing with the tonic of the Mixolydian, right? Because then you could say the tonic is the Mixolydian, right? And then you can write all of your music not with the note names, but with the relative position names, meaning I write all the progressions out without notes, just relative positions. That means I can shift it up and back, playing it in any of the 12 collections of 7 notes. You could include the ocean notes as well in this system. It could shift up. It's not like you can't play anything outside of the 7 notes, but that would be the most functional, useful thing to do. It's taking the Nashville number logic, which is actually better, and extending it so that everything is maneuverable, and that's what we want to do. So let's go to the blank tab and say, okay, if we're thinking about our chords, how would we do that? Now, what we've done before is we had our names of the chords. We're going to have the letters of the chords. The lowercase a and b is going to be A sharp or B flat. I also want to add this idea of whole numbers and or even and odd numbers, but with shapes. So I'm going to add one more thing as we go here. I'm going to put my cursor on column C, right click and insert. And then I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to go to the example tab and I'm going to grab these shapes. So I can just copy this bit right here and I'm going to go back on over and put in these shapes. Now, why do I do that? Because it makes it a little bit easier to see patterns if I see that if I start on like a square and then I do my patterns, it would be square, 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 and then circle, right? Circle, circle, and then square to go back, right? So you can actually, and that's the same thing as seeing like even numbers and odd numbers depending on where we're going to start at. So I just think that's another visual cue that might be useful to some people, might like that as a tool. So I'm going to add that then to the end of each of our notes. I'm going to double click here and I'm just going to say and grab that shape, enter. Now if you can't find that shape, ask ChatGTP or an AI to say, give me all of the Excel shapes that would be a dot and a square, and then you can just copy and paste it once you find the proper one. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to go down here. I want to paste just the formulas so it doesn't overwrite anything. So I'm going to paste just the formulas so that we've added that. All right, so we're going to be starting to work off of the Ionian. So if I take the formula, whole, half, whole, half, then we get these notes, and I'm going to name those with our Nashville number system. If I pull those over here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which you could give an abbreviated name. If you don't like to say the whole Ionian, you could just say Ion, door, fridge, lid, mix, AO, loc, and call them, I'm going to give them a letter, I, D, P, Y, X, A, and N. So that's going to be those items. All right, so then we have our distances in half steps, and then we have the normal kind of interval names. All right, so building our table. We've got the Ionian notes. So I'm going to build, now, when I think about the chords, if I go to my example tab over here, remember that the chord lists that you will see are not usually listing them out by chords built per modal point that you're going to build from, which again doesn't make a lot of sense functionally. So in other words, the chords, like if you ask for a chord table, And you're going to get something that looks like this, meaning here's the chord table condensed down. The problem is it's hard to know from the perspective of what I'm playing these, right? So if it's a 3-note chord, you could have a major chord. Well, what does that major chord apply to? Well, it would be the Ionian chord. It would be the Mixolydian chord. In other words, if you build off the 1, if you build off the 5, if you build off the 4, you're going to end up with a triad. But if you have a 4-note chord, now you have a major 7. Well, when does that happen? Well, it would be like on the Ionian, but then it's going to get messed up. The 7's going to get messed up when you get to if you get to like a Mixolydian 7, and then we call those 7 chords, right? And so this doesn't tell you, like, the table doesn't tell you functionally, well, if I'm building from each of these relative points in the 7-note collection, what's the distances relative to each of the things I'm building from, right? It just groups them all together, and you kind of have to know that. So what we're going to do is we're going to build it out from the perspective of each of the 7 nodal points, and look at it that way, and then see the multiple ways that you can see the chords, and then we'll put these chords into the buckets so that you can see where they fit, you know, in the bucket for each of the Ionian modes, and then we'll summarize it into one table over here so that we can condense it down. All right, so we started that with the Ionian. So we started with the Ionian, and we said we had a 3-note chord, a 4-note chord, a 5-note chord, a 6-note chord, and a 7-note chord, okay? And then I said, well, if we had a 3-note chord, we would call that normally a C major chord. It would be a type of major chord if I'm working from the C. Really, I'm thinking of myself as working from the Ionian node. I don't care which of the 12 collections of 7 notes I'm in, it's going to be a major chord in essence from there. But we usually name it by the point that we're working from in terms of the note point, which we're going to start with the collection of notes around the key of C, because that's no sharps and flats. That's the general practice. All right, so that means, but I'd rather call it an Ionian C2 chord. Why? Because it's a 3-note Ionian chord, and the 2 represents distance. Now notice, if I'm working from modal points from the Ionian node, then it's going to be a lot easier for me to name the chord functionally, because I can name the chord 2 primary ways. I can say, this is the note I'm starting on, and then I'm going to give you the distance to find the last note, and you take every other note in the collection of 7 notes until you get to that last note. So that means there's 2 primary ways that I can name the chord if I name it by the nodal point. One is by distance, which is like interval, right? I can say start on the Ionian node, which happens to be a C. The C is redundant, and then go up a distance of 2 modal whole steps, which would be 4 modal half steps. Or I can name the end point. I can tell you where we're going to end off, and say at that end point, that's going to be the modal range chord, meaning it's going to go from this point to that point. So let me show you multiple ways that we can kind of say this if we name it by like my equivalent of continents, continent to continent. So we could say that we have an Ionian 3. So let's add one here. I'm going to right click and insert. Another way that we could name this, I'm going to say number of notes chord, meaning I can name it just by, it's the Ionian node with this many notes in it. In other words, this would be a 3-note, I'm just going to put N for notes, Ionian. A 3-note Ionian, and this would be a 4-note Ionian. Why is that all you need? Because I know the general idea is that I just take every other modal half step or every modal whole step. So if I start on the Ionian node, then I just take every other one until I get to 3 notes, and then 4 notes, and then 5 notes. So that would be another way that you can easily say it, which is basically saying this is the starting point, and then you stop after taking every other modal half step until you get so many notes, and then you're done. So that would so let's try to do this with a formula though. This would be the 3. It's going to be 3, and then I'm going to say and and then I'm going to put quotes the N because I'm putting that in with text, and then and to tie it together to the Ionian node. That Ionian node, I want to stay constant as I copy it down. Therefore, I'm going to say F4 on the keyboard, $ before the T and the 1, enter, so that now I can copy this down. So another way I could say it, I can name all of the normal chords from the perspective or built from the Ionian node by just saying it's a 3-note Ionian chord, it's a 4-note Ionian chord, it's a 5-note Ionian chord. Just start at the Ionian, take every other note in the 7 notes collection until you get 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, 6 notes, or 7 notes, and so on. So another way you could say it, let's just right click here and insert again and say, I'm going to say this is going to be no note name. No note name. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I can call this an Ionian C2 chord, but it's redundant because if I know I'm in the 7-note collection of the C major, then the Ionian node is all I need to know. And I would recommend removing the note when you do your notation. Rather, just say, look, I'm in the 7-note collection around the C major. The Ionian is the tonic, if the Ionian is the tonic, or you can indicate that with a capital. But remove the notes so it'll be fully maneuverable or movable. Okay, so then the question is, well, how can I grab maybe this one here and remove the 2, or I can just rebuild it up again. I can say it's an Ionian 2. I could just say this is going to be, it's been an easier way to do it. It's going to be an Ionian, and it's going to be this -1. This -1, that will always work, right? So, and then I want the Ionian to remain the same. So I'm going to say F4 on the keyboard, making that absolute $ before the T and the 1, enter. So I'm just going to call it an I2 chord, meaning it's from the Ionian, you go 2 modal whole steps up. That's the convention of what that 2 means. Ionian, then 2 modal whole steps up. Here, you go Ionian, 3 modal whole steps up, which means the distance to the last note in the series of notes is 6 modal half steps up, and you just take every other note until you get there. Every other modal whole step, every other note in the 7-note collection, until you get to that end point, right? So that's the other way you can basically name it, and again remove the letter altogether for the note name. Okay, and so another thing to note is that you might be able, because we have a letter here, to indicate this with a capital. So let's insert this again. Let's go right click and insert, and say, let's say that we have, this is the root chord. So let's say we're going to say, hey, look, I'm going to tell people I'm playing in the collection of notes around the C major, and the Ionian is the root. Instead of telling them it's the root, you could just capitalize your notation for the Ionian to say, look, that's my root. So that way, all I have to tell someone is, look, this is the basic collection of notes I'm working in for this piece of music, or this part of the piece of music. And this will then tell you that that the Ionian is the root. So you could do that by saying, I want to make that capitalized. So how can I do that with it? So it would be an I2 like that. How can I do that with a formula? Let's try a tricky formula in Excel. It's going to be upper, but I just want the left bit to be upper. So I'm going to say left tab of this text is going to now be upper, and then comma 1. So now I'm going to close up that left tab bit, and then I'm going to say that closes up the upper. Let's close that up. And then I'm going to say, and I also want to have the right bit as well. So I'm going to say, and the right tab, and then I'm going to pick up that one again, comma, LEN. This is going to tell me where we're going to count from to the rest of it, tab, and it's going to be this one, that cell, close it up, -1, meaning start at the one after the one to the left and pick everything up after that one. So basically I said, give me the first one, but make it uppercase, and then give me the rest of it after the first one the way it is, right? And that gives me a long way of giving me that, right? So I have that, but that's copy and pasteable down, and so that is nice. Okay, so the next one is the modal range. So I can also name the chord, right-click, insert, by what we can call a modal range. Modal range chord. Now, the modal range is basically just saying, the other way I could say this is if I know I'm on the Ionian, and I know it's a 3-note chord, and I know the distance is going to be then 2 modal whole steps up or 4 modal half steps, then I can derive the end point, right, by going the distance, or I can tell you what the end point is, and then you can derive the distance. So notice how much nicer that is. You have the capacity or ability to do it either way if we name it by relative modal point instead of by a note name. So I could, for example, say, and I'll get into a more fancy formula later, but it's going to be a 1 to a 5, let's say. Meaning, let's do it this way, 1 to 5. Now, I'll do this more fancy in a future presentation, but in essence, I'm going to say, hey, look, this is going to be a modal range of 1 to 5. It's a modal range chord that basically means you're going to start at the Ionian, you're going to go to the Mixolydian, and then you're going to take every other note in the 7-note collection until you get to that end point. So notice, like when I look at something like this, the C major 7, it's telling you the node is C, which we happen to then know is the Ionian if we're in the collection of notes around the C major. And then we're saying the distance to the scale degree of 7, which would be 6 modal half steps up. So it's giving you the end point or the distance to the end point, right? But if I know that C is the Ionian node, then I can name the chord either way, right? I could name the chord by saying, this is the node we're starting on. Here's the distance to the last node. Just take every other note until you get there. Or I could say, this is the node we're starting on. This is the last point we're going to end at. Once again, take every other note in the collection of 7 notes until you get there, right? So this would be a 5. So I'll derive this more next time, but I'll show you this for a second. This is going to be a 7-1 modal range. This is going to be a 1-2 modal range. This is going to be a 1-4 modal range, and this will be a 1-6 modal range. Now, when we looked at these modal ranges, that could just be a range, so I might add a C after it just to indicate that it's a chord. So I'm going to insert another one here, and let's call this a modal range chord. So you might say it's going to be, if you want to indicate it's a chord, a 1-5C or something like that, right? A 1-7C, a 1-2C, a 1-4C, a 1-6C. The C does not mean the note C. I just mean that this is the range of Ionian to Mixolydian, and it's a chord. We're building a chord. It's not just it's not just the 2 notes that we're looking at. All right. Okay. I'll derive that more later. This will become more easy to see in a second. But let's also write it this way. Insert. This is going to be the modal range chord again, but written differently, which is going to be, it's going from the Ionian to the Mixolydian, and it's a C. It's going from the Ionian to the Locrian, and it's a C. It's a chord. Ionian to the Dorian, chord. The Ionian to the Lydian, chord. Ionian, Aeolian, chord. So these are modal range chords, right? It's just telling you this is the start, this is the end, and it's a chord, meaning hold down every note in between, right? All right, so that's another way I can say it. So those are the multiple ways that we can say it. This is the normal way. All right, let's build this out so we can see what it looks like. If I look at this from a scale degree, and then modal half steps. This is not the header of this column. This is the normal name, But no, this is going to be the headers as we go to the right over here. I'm going to make this a little bit wider, meaning I'm going to have scale degrees of 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. In other words, when we build a chord, if I make what I'm building it from the 1, then we take every other scale degree, 1, 3, 5, 7, and then the 9 is equivalent to the 2 we skipped. The 11 is equivalent to the 4 we skipped, the 13, the 6 that we skipped. Now, I'd rather call it a modal half step, which means we start at 0 modal half steps, so I don't have to renumber or name the node that we're on. So it would be, from a measurement standpoint, 0, 2 modal half steps, 4 modal half steps, 6 modal half step, 8 modal half step, 10 modal half step, 12 modal half steps. So from that perspective, the scale degrees are all off by 1 because they're counting the point that they're on as though that's a distance that they're moving. So let's select all of these, and I'm going to double click and make them smaller. I'm going to make this whole bit like blue just to indicate that this is going to be kind of together on this side, and white. Let's make it blue and white. All right. So there we have that. So then we can say, all right, what are going to be the modal points then that we're looking at? I'm moving my cheat sheet down here. So if we're looking at modal points, so we want, for the purposes of my formula, I want to have a 1 here, which represents the Ionian node. So I'm going to do this with a formula, equals the x lookup. I want to find this Ionian and get the relative number. So I'm going to say comma, and I'm going to find it in this series. So I'm going to say find that in here, comma, and then return to me the number, which is here. Return to me the number, and then enter. So that gives me a 1. I'm going to double click on that again, and then the range, I'm going to absolutize it. F4 on the keyboard, F4 on the keyboard, F4 and F4, so that when I copy and paste this down, then those ranges will stay fixed. All right, so that's going to be 1, and then I'm going to call this modal points numbers. In other words, these are going to be the distances up top that we can measure in either scale degrees or modal half steps, and then we can determine what point we're going to land on from a numbers perspective. So if I start on the Ionian, which is going to be, I'm starting, let's just say, hold on a sec. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal, we're going to start on the Ionian node, and I'm going to start on that all the way down. So I'm going to say this equals the Ionian node, and I'll copy that down. What we're going to do then is just go up every other node. So if I'm on the Ionian node, how do you build this thing? Well, you just take every other note in the collection of notes, which from a modal half step would be every other modal half step, or each modal whole step. If you want to think about it like that, from a scale degree, you take every other scale degree, starting at the first one that you made the 1. So this is going to be this plus 2, right? And this is going to be the same. So I can copy this over, 3 plus 2. So the distance is I'm starting on the Ionian, and then I go up 2, and which will bring me to 3, which is the Phrygian, and then 5, which is going to be the Mixolydian. And so I can copy that down. If I kept going up, then that's going to be the next series that we can add. But I want to be able to copy this down, and if I go over 7, then I'm going to bring it back around to the local distance. In other words, the modal points are not going to have octaves. How could I do that? I'm going to double click and say in here, I'm going to add in front of it, we're going to say if tab. If this plus this, I'm going to copy that, is if that plus that is less than 8, which means it could go up to 7 but not above 7, then comma, do that same thing. But then comma, if it's greater than 7, then you want to do that and then subtract 7 to bring it back down into the local range. So I'm going to say okay, and then I can copy that across, boom, and then I can copy that down, bam, and then I'm just going to copy this over one more. So if it was a 7, a C major 7, then it would be the Ionian plus 2 would be the Phrygian plus 2, Mixolydian plus 2 gives you the Locrian. Copy that down. Then these I can copy across. The next one out, hold on, the next one out after Locrian, there's no 8. It brought it around to 2, right? Which is the Dorian, because I can't go up to 8 because there's no mode out there. And then it goes to 4, which that would be the Dorian, and then the 4 is going to be the Lydian, and then it goes out to the 6, which is going to be the Aeolian. So you can see this one has everything. We start on the 1, the Ionian, the 3, which is going to be the what, no, I'm getting mixed up. The Lydian, right? Is it the Phrygian, right? And then the 5 Mixolydian, the 7's the Locrian, 2's the Dorian, 4's the Lydian, 3's the Phrygian, and then the Aeolian. Hopefully I said that right. But we'll give us the names shortly. All right. So then let's give us the abbreviated names so I don't mess that up. So let's say now we're going to say modal points and letters. Modal point letters. So again, I'm going to give me the same numbers here from a scale degrees out is 1 out to 13. Let's keep that the same. Bring this out to 13. And then let's make this, I'm going to select from here to here, double click, making them tighter. I'm going to bring this 1 in as well. So there we have that. And then I'm going to say this equals this one. And we'll copy this across. Copy this across. Okay, and then I'll make this green just so I can alternate, so I can see there's a difference here. I'll make that green and bracketed and maybe white. Okay, so that's too light of a green. Isn't there a darker green than that? Let's do that green. Okay, so now I want to convert that Ionian. I want to convert all these numbers to the letter of the Ionian and the Phrygian and the Mixolydian and so on. So this is going to be equals to x lookup, find that 1, comma. I want you to find it in this series right here. Boom. And then return to me, comma, the letters, the letter format. So I can see it in letter format. And there we have it. Double clicking on it again. I'm going to make the ranges absolute by F4, here F4, here F4, here F4, $sign before the letters and numbers. So when I copy it across, we should be good. So I'll copy it all the way across to start out with. And then I'll copy it down. And then I'll just delete the bits that don't work. I'm going to delete this. I could do a fancy formula maybe to do that automatic. But anyway, so it's so a triad from the C, or an Ionian triad, a 3-note Ionian chord. I don't care if it's a C triad or any 12 collections, any of the 12 collections of 7 notes, it's going to have an Ionian, Phrygian, and a Mixolydian. And then the next, if I have a 4-note collection, a 4-note Ionian chord is going to have the same 3 nodes plus the Locrian. And then a 5-note chord is going to have the same 4 plus the Dorian. A 6-note chord is going to have the same 5 plus the Lydian. And finally adding the Aeolian. All right, so then next, let's look at the note half-step distance. I'm going to call this note half-step distance, or we can say note half-step for the abbreviation. Once again, I'm going to say this is going to be equal to this equals that. We'll copy it across till we get to there. I'm going to select all of these, double click, and then make this first one smaller so that we have this going across here. Make it large enough that it encompasses my header. Okay, so then we're gonna look at the note half steps. Let's make this a different color again, maybe making it, I'll make this black and white as we alternate here. All right, so this then, note half steps. All right, so what I want to do then is find the distance of this Ionian node from itself, meaning if I go over here and I look at the distance in half steps. So remember, I have this collection of notes. I can look at what I call the modal half steps, but I also, that's going to be different from the actual 12 note collection, because this is 7 of the 12 note collection. So I want to look at the distance here. Now, how can I do that with a formula? Well, I could look up like the Ionian here and try to say, well, what if the Ionian, I want you to find that Ionian, give me the number, which is in our case a 4. For this one, we're going to say a 4, and then we want you to subtract it from the Ionian if it went a distance of 0. And then the Phrygian, find the number of the 8, and then subtract it from the related 4 for the Ionian to give me the distance. Now you might say that's only going to give me the distance for the C major, which is true if I think about it by notes. But remember, the definition is that the same pattern moves up for all 12 collections of 7 notes. So as long as the pattern is the same, then it'll be the same distances for all of the 12 collections of 7 notes from the Ionian. All right, so let's try to figure that out. So first off, let's do this one piece at a time. Let's do it down here, and we'll just build it out. So I'm going to say, so do an X lookup. I want to X lookup, and then I want to find that Ionian, let's say, comma, and I want to find it in this range. Find it in that range, and then comma, and then return to me the note number, which is over here. So I'm going to say, give me that. Let's start there. Just give me that, and there's that. Okay, that's cool. And then I want to do that like again, right, and subtract that from each other. So let me copy that. I'm going to copy that whole thing, enter, and then I could say, okay, this is gonna be equal to that minus itself, that again, and then enter, and that gives me 0, which makes sense. That's what I want. But the problem is that I could end up with a negative number here, because it's possible that I'm going to be measuring something like up here with the Locrian, which is a 3, minus up here. So I really need to take it around the circle. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a little bit fancy in here and say, okay, if it's negative, we're going to do an if function. So I'm going to double click in here, and I'm going to say equals if tab. I'm going to copy this whole thing. If that whole thing, which I know comes out to be 0, if that whole thing is greater than -1, meaning it's 0 or above 0, then comma, do that whole thing. I'm pasting it again. It looks long, but I'm just pasting that whole thing again. And then comma, if not, then do that whole thing, but add 12 to it so that I'm in the range of notes 0 through 12. So I enter, and it closes it out, and it's 0. So I think that's good. We won't really know until I copy it to an area where there's going to be a problem, but I think it's good. I'm going to copy this across this way, and hold on, problem, double click. I need to make absolute values for all of the ranges, which I should have done first, but now I got to go through the whole thing. F4, 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 just the ranges, F4, 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 not that first bit, F4, 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 F4. All right, all the ranges are absolutized. Let's try it again. Otra vez, por favor. All right, so something funny happened here because it should be taking the Ionian. Okay, now I have another problem because I don't want to take the Ionian the Phrygian minus the Ionian. So I want to take, so let me do this again. All right, let me think about this. Let's test this out again. I'm going to delete this bit. Okay. So if I think about it, when I go to the P over here, I want it to take the related value for the P minus the I. So that's going to be, this is a 1 and the P is the 3. So I said X lookup, and we found this Ionian. And so this one is going to be like the second one minus the first one. So I want that one to be able to move. But then this one, the second one in each of them, I want to remain the same. So I would think then that I would want to make that absolute with an F4, but I actually want a mixed reference because I want to allow it to move down. I want to allow it to move down, but not across to the right. So that means I want it to move. I want to freeze going to the right. So I need a $ just before the letter. So that means that on each of these, the second one after the minus sign, I have to put a $ before the letter. So if I go to the next one, it goes after the minus sign, a $ before the letter. And then I gotta go boom. I should have done this first. And then negative sign, $ before the letter. Okay. So that means it's gonna, so when I move this over, it's gonna take the P minus the I relative positions, and then when I copy it down, it should take this P minus this I. It actually wouldn't matter if I made it absolute, because then it would take it minus the first one, which is the same anyways. That would have been easier, but I think it's more consistent this way. Let's copy it across, check it out, and then copy it down. Okay, so it looks like it's doing the right thing, and then I'm going to delete this stuff. I won't really know until we test it out, till we get the negative number that we'll test out, but that was boom, 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 delete this, delete that. All right, so here's here's going to be the distance in note half steps, not in modal half steps, right? And then I can look at because the modal half steps are here, right? Here's the modal half steps, which results in these note, or the note distances, meaning like the fifth scale degree is 4 modal half steps up, which is 7 notes up. Okay, so now let's say that the next thing we could do is add the intervals. What are the intervals to get to each of these areas? So I'm going to say this is going to be the interval distance. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to this again, same series, but now we're going to look at the distance from the standpoint of the intervals, which are all, off by 1, not the best. That's the conventional measurement, but then we'll do it by modal distance, which I think is a better way to do it. So let's pull this in here, and so we'll go boom. Let's make this green. So I'll make this green. So now I'm going to say green and white, that I'm going to find each of these distances, the note distances, and then give me the distance here, right? So I'm going to find these distances and give me the name for the distances. These are just giving me the normal names for the interval names. So find the note distance, retrieve for me the names for the interval names. These are local distance interval names. So I can just do a simple X lookup again. Good old X lookup. I love the X lookup. Who doesn't love X lookup? So we're going to say, I don't need a negative number really. So let's just say from here to here, give me those, find those distances in half steps, comma, and return to me. Oh, wait a sec. Hold on, I messed up. Let's do this again. Enter, otra vez, equals X lookup. I have to hit this one first. Find that 0, comma, then find it in, I don't need negative distances, just the positive distances. Find it in that range, and then comma, return to me the name. Boom. Bam. All right. So that means the zero note away is a 0 note away perfect first. Or in other words, the Ionian to the Ionian is a 0 note away, which we call a perfect first from a scale degree. Double clicking on that, absolutizing the second number, F4, 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 and then F4, enter. We can copy it then across, copy it down, and now we've got, let's delete all of these bits, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Select these items, double click, and make this distance skinny again. All right, so now we can see like, obviously, you know, the distance to the Phrygian is 4 notes away, which we call a 4 note away major third, right? The distance from the Ionian to the Mixolydian, that range, is a 7 note away perfect fifth. The distance from the Ionian to the Locrian is an 11 note away major 7. Now, I would like to call it by what I call the modal distance, right? So the modal distance, I could just build this out. So I'd rather call it something like this, modal distance. And so we're going to say this is the better way to do it. If we could start this over from scratch, which I think we can because we have the chat GTP and the other AIs to help us make things more efficient without having to totally rewrite everything every time, because chat GTP can do it. So now's the time. Now's the time to clean this mess up. Clean this mess up. Clean up your room. It's time to clean your room. Isn't that the trend these days? You have to clean. We're cleaning it up. Okay. Anyway, so we're gonna say that this is gonna be what I'd like to call it then is a 0 note away from the Ionian node, which is going to be the number of modal whole steps away. So I can get then, so I should just be able to build this out. So this is just going to be equals the number steps away, 0, and then I'm going to say and. It's going to be 0 and then the node we're on, we're starting from the Ionian. I'm just going to go over here and grab that Ionian. Give me that Ionian. So there's the Ionian, and then I'm going to say and then give me the modal distance, which is that one. Boom. So I'm going to call it a 0 note away from the Ionian node, 0th modal half step, which would be the first scale degree. Double clicking on that. Then this Ionian, F4 on the keyboard, because I want it to remain the same. The I needs to stay the same. Copying this across, copying it down, and then I'm going to delete from the 6 over here, and then delete from here to here, from here to here, from there to there. Now there's a problem here, isn't there? There's a problem here, isn't there? Let's put this back here. Let's do this again. Let's delete this. There's no. Something has gone horribly wrong, because this, I don't want this bit to move down. So that's going to be BD. So I want this to move to the right, but not down. So that means I need to put something, a $sign on the one that's going down. So this is BD. So I need to put a $sign before the number to freeze it. Don't move it down. Don't move it down, Excel. Do it again. Sorry about that, but try it again. Just don't move it down this time. Okay, so then we're gonna say, I think that works. Let's check it out. Let's delete this. Did it work? Funciona? I don't know. No, lo, say. Yeah, I think it did. So now we've got, like, this one is 4 notes away from the Ionian node, second modal half step, which is the 3rd scale degree. All right, that's cool. What if we want to give the actual notes that we're given right here? So let's look at the note names. So same thing, I'm going to say this equals these, and then I'm going to copy that down and copy it across, but I want to look at it from the perspective of the note this time, which is a C, baby. I'm going to select all these, and then I'm going to double click, and I'm bring this in again. One more round. One more round. I didn't hear no bell. I don't stop till I hear a bell. Why? Because that's when food happens. That's when food happens. And I ain't stopping till food happens. Okay. So then we're going to say this is going to be equal to X lookup. And then I'm going to say X lookup. And I'm going to say that, okay, so I want to look this up. I want to find the distance here. So I want to look up this distance of 0 notes away, that distance 0 notes away, plus the starting point, which we said was a C. So I don't want to pick this C up. That's why I put the C's down here. This 4 represents a C. So it's going to be 0 notes away from the C, which is just find that 4, 0 notes away from the 4. And then, okay, and so we want to, and then comma, I want to find that over here in the note numbers, find that in here, and then comma, return to me then the note names. So give me the note names. So boom. So now we can actually find the note, which of course, and that will be changeable now. So now I can change from the key of C to any of them, and it'll find the relative position or the relative note names if we do this properly. Let's go back into here and say, okay, let's make these two F4. Let's do that first this time, because I'm gonna have to make an adjustment to it, because it's possible that when I do this addition, I end up with something that is greater than 12. And so once again, I want to keep it in the local distance of around 12. So when I do the addition, so I have to add one more piece. I'm going to say if in here, embed the if, and then if this whole thing, I'm going to copy this. If that whole thing is less than 13, which means it's going to be 12. It's going to be 12 or lower. It's within the alphabet of A through A sharp. Then just do that. But if not, comma, then do that minus 12. Close it up. So that looks messy, but all I did was put the if function in there, which is going to result in the same, in this case, 0 plus 4, 4 representing a C, and then it's gonna pull the related C. So I think that works. Enter, but something is wrong. Something is wrong, they say. So if that plus that, okay, let's do the whole thing again. I'm gonna delete this. Let's do it again. Undo, Control Z, double click on it. So I see what happens. So I need an if here, tab, just this bit, not the whole thing, copy. If that bit, which comes out to, we know is 4, if that bit is less than 13, then, comma, do that. If not, comma, do that, Control V, minus 12. Close it up. Enter. Okay. So then I can copy that across. And no, I can't. I can't copy it across. Something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. Once again, how many times? Okay, I think I didn't F4 the range. I need to F4 the range. F4 the range. Absoluting the range. All right, let's try it again. Otra vez. Por favor. Dios, for crying out loud, míos. Que está pasando aquí? It's still messed up. You don't know what you're doing. Okay, I see now. This R4 needs to be absolute too. Absolute the R4, or I could, the R4, I want it to, no, that should be fine. The R4 should be fine. I don't want it to move to the right. I don't want it to move to the right. Okay, so R4 can't move to the right. So that's going to be, I need a $ before the letter. F4. So that makes it a mixed reference. You are making this so complicated. I know. This is, no, it's not. Okay. Okay, but I have to do it for all the R4s. Let me do it for all the R4s. $sign before the R. $sign before the R. All right. Let's try it again. Try it again. I think I got it. All right, let's copy it down. Let's copy it down. Delete. Delete. Trim it. Trim. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says, yeah, that's right. I think that's right. Okay, I think we got it. Okay, you made that look very difficult. It's not that difficult. I just made it look difficult. I know I have a talent for making things look difficult. That's why that's why they pay me the big bucks. Anyways, next time we'll clean this up a bit, and then I'll put it into the bucket over here. I'll put it into our buckets for the normal naming convention, so we can kind of compare where it would be. Obviously, the Ionian mode is going to be in what you would expect for the buckets. It'll be in the major bucket because all of the chords are built off the major mode. And then, of course, we need to clean up the formatting and all that stuff for formatting's sake. And then we'll move on to the other. Let's look at the major modes first, which will be the 1, 4, 5, the Lydian, the mixed Lydian, and then we'll move back to the minor modes and then to the Locrian.